We've gathered this morning, family and friends, to honor the memory of Janet Guggenheim and to offer comfort to one another. We join in prayers and psalms seeking comfort, hoping to find guidance in the midst of our loss, and thus linking Janet's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. From Psalm 121, Esai nai el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai osei shemaim va'aretz. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. Adonai ma'adam v'teda'ehu, ben enosh v'techashvehu. God, what are we? What are we that you have regard for us, that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are as a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to revert to dust, saying, "Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. God, you redeem the soul of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate." From the words of Ecclesiastes, L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashemayim, et leleretz ve'et lamut, et leta'at ve'et la'kur natua. Et leleretz ve'et lamut, et lifrotz ve'et livnots, et livkot ve'et lischok, et sephod ve'et rakod. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. According to our tradition, one of the highest honors we have is to eulogize a loved one. And so on behalf of the family, I'd like to invite up Janet's daughter, Amy, first, followed by Janet's son, Steve, and followed by her granddaughter, Maddie, to share some memories.
So first of all, I really appreciate everybody flying in today from near and far to celebrate our mom's life and legacy. And thank you to our family and friends who have joined virtually, wherever the camera is. Hi, guys. We're blessed with an amazing family, and all of whom have made this whole process for us a lot sweeter and a lot easier. And I want to specifically recognize that my Aunt Joyce, who I know would love to be here today, is also on the webcast, and I just wanted to call her out and say, we love you, Aunt Joyce, and we're thinking about you. I also wanted to thank Rabbi Daniel for giving us kids and grandkids the space yesterday to tell stories and talk about my mom, and It was a really sort of therapeutic process and really special, and also thank you for the service today. Now on to Janet. Kind, inspiring, understated, brave, patient, tad stubborn, and deeply supportive. Those are just a few of the words that come to mind when I think of my mom. She touched so many lives. Her parents, brothers, nieces, nephews, friends, coworkers, students, and most profoundly my dad, my brother and I, and her grandchildren who she adored. My mom was an extraordinary role model and my rock of stability, just like my dad. They were always there to offer perspective, love, and support, grounding me through childhood through adulthood. Alongside the love and stability my mom provided, I gained invaluable lessons by watching her actions. And here I wanted to share 4 life lessons that I learned from watching my mom. First of all, my mom was a trailblazer who defied the conventional female role models or female roles of her era. Given that trait, she picked the perfect life partner in my dad. He not only supported her, but he also enthusiastically and unselfishly encouraged her ambition. From a high school English teacher forced to quit when she got pregnant, because that was what you did in those days, she rose to become the dean of Davenport University. Watching her break through the glass ceiling in the male-dominated world of college administration filled my dad with pride. I don't think that Steve and I realized how impressive her career was until we were much older. She made it look easy, and she was humble about her accomplishments. In fact, her friend Diane told me recently that Diane would go around and brag about her friend Janet because Janet never did. Unlike on the Archie Bunker show, there were no slippers and pipe for my dad when he walked in the door. Well, anyone who knows Bernie would know that the pipe was likely already in his hand anyway. My mom drew outside of those stereotypical lines as well. She didn't see having dinner on the table as only her role. In fact, especially as we got older, Dad was the chef, or at least our preferred chef, often joking that my mom's favorite meal to cook was leftovers, which meant that he had to cook the meal in the first place, so it was a virtuous circle, I guess. My mom had a growth mindset before it was cool. She took up gardening in her 30s, jogging in her 40s, and golfing in her 50s. My dad might have been waiting for cooking in her 60s, but alas, no. My mom was very caring, yet had her own non-traditional version of what it meant to be maternal. For example, I can remember my brother and I needing to sit down and tell our mom that she could stop pouring Cheerios in a bowl for us every evening before she went to bed. She would pour 2 bowls of Cheerios, put saran wrap around them, a napkin out, and a spoon out, so that we would have breakfast in the morning even if she wasn't there. And I think we were in our teens when Steve finally looked at me one morning and said, "Hey, you think we should tell Mom we can pour our own Cheerios?" I have no doubt that my mom's trailblazing has paved the way for me, my brother, and Maddie in all areas of our lives, and I hope for my nephews and nieces as well. Second thing that I learned from my mom was my mom built enduring friendships. I'll get to the relationships that she built with family in a few minutes, but my mom demonstrated the importance of building deep and enduring friendships. She maintained close bonds with Vicky and Sue and Diane and the Bettys, as we always call them, from her teens through her 80s. Her friendships were a testament to her loyalty and the genuine connections that she built through her life. My friends often commend me for building lasting bonds, and of course, I can thank my mom. Third, my mom prioritized experiences over possessions and instilled in us a love for travel. Our parents got Steve and I hooked on travel. Steve and me. That is funny because my mom always corrects me. I got you, Mom, but I actually had written it right on the page, I think. She got us hooked on travel, and in particular, international travel early. In fact, my mom used to say that her income was deposited directly into our family vacation account. We knew it was a priority. Her first overseas adventure, a post-college trip to Europe with Vicky Buckfire, remained a cherished memory. European road trips were always an adventure. And for those of you who know my dad well, you can imagine this scene. My dad would simultaneously drive the car while reading the map. The map, of course, was sitting on top of his steering wheel, while his glasses, which he needed for driving, but were not required for map reading, were sitting on top of his head. And all of you know Bernie was thrifty, so because stick shift cars were cheaper, he was doing all of this while he was upshifting and downshifting, and I'm sure he was smoking his pipe while he was doing this. And this level of excitement was only heightened on our British road trip, where all of that I just mentioned was happening on the other side of the road. I wonder how we made it out alive. So my mom's very high value role throughout this experience was, again, if you know my parents' relationship, you know what her role was, which was to yell, "Bernie!" The problem for Steve and I was that my dad knew to preemptively lower his hearing aids in anticipation of my mom yelling about his driving. So not only were Steve and I white-knuckling it in the back of the car, but we were sitting there wishing that we had our own hearing aids to turn down. Of course, there was the trip to Spain when Child Protective Services should have been called. Though I must have blacked this out, and I'm surprised that my mom did this. She recounted a story where they, incredibly to me, left Steve and I in the car alone in Spain in front of a casino, so that in the parking lot, so that they could go in and play blackjack and have a drink. I'm like, how many parental violations are there in that one sentence? But it's sort of a shocking story. More recently, Ed, Maddie, and I cherished our 15 years visiting Grandma and Grandpa in Carmel as they vacationed there for a month, and in the spring and in the fall, beginning when Maddie was 5 months old. My mom and I particularly loved the sunsets at the Inn at Spanish Bay, where every evening a bagpiper would play while walking along the ocean golf course along the dunes of the 18th hole. My mom and I would sip wine at the fire pit. Maddie enjoyed her hot chocolate, and Ed and my dad enjoyed complaining about how they didn't like the sound of a bagpiper. It was all double the fun when Steve, Joni, and the kids would come down as well. The fourth life lesson that I learned from my mom was about family. Family was the cornerstone of my mom's life. Many a Friday night, we gathered at Grandma Minnie's apartment. We celebrated the Jewish holidays all together, and they were warm and fun. We swam in Ralph and Anita's pool, sailed in Joyce and Allen's lake, and Nance and I rode the PPV in the Franklin Parade. We always have to get that story in. My mom and her brothers and their wives made us all feel special. My parents adored their nieces and nephews, and they each built individual bonds with them lasting over their lifetimes. I've had many conversations with all of my cousins about the specialness of our collective relationships and what wonderful role models we all had about family as we grew up together. I also knew this about my dad's brother Herbie and his sister-in-law Shirley and their two kids, Lisa and Sue. We would drive out to New York and visit, and they were so very special to my mom and dad, and also still to us. My mom and her brothers took care of their mother until she passed away at the ripe old age of 94, another example to my brother and me of how she put family first. Janet admired and adored our brothers Hilbert, Alan, and Ralph. Ralph resented losing his spot as the youngest and didn't much like taking care of his little sister, I'm told, so he'd often pretend to play dead, and my kind-hearted, maybe gullible mother fell for it every time. She often reminisced about Hilbert tutoring her in math and how Alan and Ralph brought home a parade of friends from college, leaving her sad each time they went back to school. She definitely believed that her brothers married up, so to speak, and felt incredibly fortunate to have Jean, Joyce, and Anita as her sisters. My mom adored her grandkids and effortlessly built relationships with each of them. I can most closely reflect on the love and pride she held for Maddie as I experienced it up close for the last 20 years, though I know she felt this love for all of her grandkids. As she always had with me, she picked up Maddie's calls on the first ring. She made Maddie feel like she was her top priority. They spent so much quality time together, whether it was dance recitals in San Francisco, sitting on my parents' deck in Huntington Woods, walks on the beach in Florida, or watching the tuna be fed at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And then, of course, was her 60-year love story with my dad. My mom stood by his side, always. She showed me that though marriage is rarely a perfect union, and though it can take work, it's also the world's most beautiful partnership. Throughout their long marriage, their commitment to one another never faltered. Just before my dad passed away, in what would be his last lucid conversation with my brother and I, he tearfully shared how much the depth of my mom's commitment meant to him. He told us that she had fully understood that he would face lifelong health challenges from his early battles with Crohn's disease, and yet she jumped into their marriage with both feet. They stood by each other's side for 60 years, and their unwavering trust, commitment, and love was paramount above all else. My mom's trailblazing life, her commitment to friendships, her love for travel and adventure and experiences over material goods, and her dedication to family set a very high bar for how I've tried to live my own life. Thank you, Mom, for setting the bar high, for living true to it, and for always being there for us. Here's to moms that make us better. Here's to you, Mom. And my brother's going to make a crack about how he's much pithier than I am, so wait for it.
So, as you know, our dad died about 2 years ago, and now my mom. Oscar Wilde said, "To lose one parent is a tragedy. To lose two begins to seem like carelessness." And it kind of makes me think about how my parents would have reacted to that line very differently. My dad would have definitely laughed. He would have laughed this sort of long, knowing laugh. And my mom, and we saw this actually, Joni pointed this out, Alice Clegan does this too, would have given this head nod. It's not a little, it's not a lot, it's just a little. And it could mean a lot of things. It could mean, in this case, I'm not sure what I think about that. I guess what you said is funny to somebody. Or it could mean something like, if you say so, dear. Or it could mean, try again. She managed to convey a lot with that head nod. My mom and dad were different in other ways too. My dad was a storyteller who loved his own stories. I didn't always get the point, but at least I was sure he was enjoying himself. My mom, on the other hand, rarely told stories, at least not unless you asked for one. My dad was talkative. My mother was quiet but driven. You could definitely see it in the way she played golf. She'd focus intently, gather herself, take a mighty swing, and launch the ball a good 25 yards. She'd walk to the ball, always walking. She made a big point of walking the course. Take another swing, and then another, and another. And eventually, 20 or 30 swings later, she'd be on the green. But it never frustrated her. She loved playing golf, and I think maybe secretly she was a Buddhist who believed golf was all about the journey. And as you know, she also lived to walk. In later years, it became increasingly difficult for her to achieve her 10,000 steps through actual steps, but she still found a way. Folks at the Balfour, which is the assisted living facility where my mom lived, say that they saw her standing in the hallway waving her pedometer back and forth to get the additional steps. One way or another, my mom was always going to get there. Despite being quiet, as Amy noted, she managed to connect with many, many people. Some of those connections, such as childhood friends, later became married friends. Then they became widowed friends. but they remained her friends for her entire life. And when they were gone, she missed them dearly. Even her stubbornness won her admirers. For example, in the later stages of dementia, my mother was often insistent that the Balfour had forgotten to give her a shower. Nothing could change her mind, not the evidence of a shower which was already wet, a soaking towel, or the fact that she seemed remarkably clean for somebody who hadn't showered. On the day my mother died, Judy, one of the nurses at the Balfour, told us a story about my mom's showers. One day my mother forgot she had already showered, got the Balfour to give her another, then forgot again that she had had a shower and insisted on another. This happened, according to Judy, 16 times that day. It might have been slightly exaggerated, but Judy was one of the people at the Balfour, and there were many, because they were all there, who really loved my mom. She loved that she was a, quote, tough, stubborn old bird, close quote. As I said, and as you probably know, if you spent 15 minutes with him at any point in your life, my parents were remarkably different, and Amy certainly touched upon that and spoke to it. But somehow, they were the yin to the other's yang, the perfect meshing of distinct and sometimes contradictory personalities. And I think we both think they loved each other because of their differences. And I will always think of them together.
Good morning. I just want to say before I start that I'm so moved and grateful by all the love in the room, in person and on Zoom. And I learned it from my parents and my grandparents, just how important family is. So I'm just really grateful for all the love here today. When I think of my grandmother, I don't think of warm-baked cookies. I think of strength, and I think of a woman ahead of her time. I picture her at the dinner table with my grandpa, flirting together and debating whatever they're debating. I think of the woman who put others first and who showered her grandkids with love. I'm grateful for all the time I got to spend with my grandma and my grandpa these past 20 years of my life. They would come out, as my mom mentioned, to Carmel for 2 months, and growing up, I would go up every single weekend, and some of my fondest memories are there. Our routine consisted of making sure my grandmother hit her 10,000 steps, of going to the aquarium, and hot cocoa for me and wine for them at the inn at Spanish Bay. To know my grandma is to feel her love, and as much as I would love to hear her call me dear one more time, it brings me peace knowing that she is watching over us with Grandpa now by her side. I found a letter that I'd sent to my grandma back in August of 2022, and I thought I would share it today. I wrote, "Dear Grandma, I'm so appreciative to have a grandmother as supportive, kind, loving, and inspiring as you. You and Grandpa always made me feel so loved. You both were my rocks. I love laughing with you, Grandma, and going on walks and going out to buy caramel candies. You give the best hugs. You make me feel complete and happy. When I'm a grandmother, I hope I make my granddaughter as happy as you make me. I miss you all the time. I wish I could come see you right now. I love you, Maddie." 2 years later, all of that is still true and more. In this moment and in this past week, all I've been thinking about is how grateful I am to have had the most incredible grandmother and grandfather, both showering me with love and being incredible role models that I look up to. Thank you.
Jewish tradition is that just before a memorial service, the inner circle of mourners puts on a ribbon and tears it. The career ribbon is to show outwardly how one's heart feels on the inside. It's torn. Something's missing. There is pain. But what's interesting is that when you put on that ribbon, you said a blessing. Blessed are you, God of truth. It's strange, because usually when we think of blessings, we think of Shabbat, of holidays, of times of joy. Why right now would one say a blessing? It doesn't seem to make sense. But the rabbis of old were reminding us that we should give thanks for the blessing of the time that we had with our loved one. It was a reminder of the good that could serve as an inspiration for the future. And it was a reminder of the wonderful qualities which blessed our lives. Amy, Steve, and Maddie, your eulogies, your memories beautifully captured your mom and your grandma. And they're a reminder for all of us that there's so much to be thankful for in Janet's life, for the persistent, driven, kind, and humble woman who she was. The woman who, with her bold jewelry, bright clothes, bright red hair, was always put together. The three of you have already shared so much, and so I'll try not to repeat stories, but I do want to add a few more memories shared yesterday with me that continue to capture the beauty of her life and her relationships. As we heard, family was the cornerstone of Janet's life, and it was a value that she learned from a young age. Because her parents, Nate and Minnie of blessed memory, were running the confectionery store and then later Sauce and Sodas, Janet spent lots of time with her grandmother, Dora, and learned that's what you do for family. You're there for them. You help, and you take care of them. From her parents, she learned a strong work ethic and the responsibility to take care of her family. And from the holidays hosted to the homework help from her brothers, she learned to be present with family and take time for what was most important. As a child, she had a good life, though she did have some bumps along the way. Like the time her teacher recognized and made sure Janet knew she didn't have a voice for singing. Her teacher told her, "Don't sing, just move your lips." But that didn't stop Janet, who found other ways to sing throughout her life, even in these past few years as she would walk the halls of the Balfour, her residence. She could be heard singing songs such as Bing Crosby's "Don't Fence Me In." And there was that one time in California when she was mistaken for the musician Janet Guggenheim. She had fun with it and played with it for a bit. Music, along with her ice cream, chocolate ice cream, and flowers in the garden, remained some of her passions throughout her life. As we heard, when Janet set her mind to something, she was sure to accomplish it. For years, she had convinced others that Bernie was the stubborn one. But Janet could be convincing, and somehow she was almost always right. Almost always, because there was that whole name thing. Even though she married into the family, she wanted the Guggenheim family to know that it was actually pronounced Guggenheim, and she would introduce herself that way. Janet met Bernie on a blind date. Toby Brewer had been the matchmaker, and when Bernie first arrived to pick up Janet, he almost turned around. But after meeting Janet, something felt right for them, and they continued dating. Coming from her traditional background, it was important to Janet's parents that he was Jewish, and so they kept asking if he was. After getting tired of the question, Janet assured them, "Yes, I looked." After just 3 months, Bernie proposed. Since it was the same ring he used to propose to an ex-fiancée, Janet only accepted after making sure that she would be getting a different ring. Bernie and Janet, as we heard, were married for 61 years. They loved each other and continued to flirt with one another throughout their lives. They were a great match, sharing their hopes and dreams with each other, able to get over their bickering with a little bit of flirting, and by building each other up. Janet was shy when she was young. Bernie helped her become more confident and was Janet's biggest supporter. They talked about challenges and how to overcome them. And Bernie helped Janet grow her sense of self. They had a symbiotic relationship and were there for one another. When Bernie was losing his sight, Janet became his eyes. They would golf together, and following a drive, Janet would help Bernie find his ball. Or when going places, Janet would drive while Bernie would navigate, each playing to their strengths. Together they built their family with Amy and Steve. As we heard from both of you, she was a wonderful mother, had a great maternal instinct, and knew how to take care of you. Whether it was that cereal, or for so many years being the elf at the bottom of the laundry chute who magically washed and returned your clothes to you on the second floor. Somehow, in the shadow of your dad when you were younger, you overlooked how bright, talented, and strong she was. But as we heard from both of you, she was a wonderful teacher of life, role model in relationships, instructor on being gender blind, and how she thrived in a male-dominated world. Your mom was kind, welcoming, and loving. Ed, you felt that right away. She always included you and became a second mother to you. And it didn't take long. While you were still dating Amy and went on a trip to Hawaii, you said something that could have been a deal breaker, but not for Janet, who warned you, Amy, don't mess this up. Joan, though her first words to you were, just how Catholic are you? She quickly grew to love you too, and welcomed you, Peter and Christina and Daniel and their Henry and Millie into her family. As we heard from Addie, she loved her grandchildren, and you loved her, even making more recently your daily phone calls to her to let her know that you loved her, because you knew it would brighten her day. And she was interested in your lives as well. From the moment Maddie was born, she and Bernie would take you with them for a week and give your parents some respite. And there was that time together, trips to Florida, as we heard, to Carmel, golf games, and to trips to the aquarium. Jeremy, Jacob, and Aaron, though you were a little bit further away, it was the same for you. At 13, there was the trip for you, Jeremy, to Russia. Jacob and Aaron, after your bar mitzvah, it was the trip to China. She instilled within each of you a love for traveling. There were the trips to Shelter Island and holidays at Grandma Katz's. She enjoyed playing golf with you, though your shots tended to go a little bit further and a little straighter. And she was there for you, providing insights and sometimes even a little style advice. Erin, as a fellow educator, she wanted to make sure that you made a good first impression. So she took you to Macy's to buy you a white button-down shirt and a tie that you had to wear in order to succeed. Though she hadn't been in a classroom for almost 3 decades, she knew what you needed, and you trusted her with that guidance. Until you arrived that first day and you saw that you were the only one in a button-down shirt with a tie. And your grandmother knew how to weaponize her grandma guilt as well, her Jewish grandma guilt, inspiring you to have a bar mitzvah ceremony or even to change your flight one time so that you could have dinner with your grandparents. She could lay it on thick. And then the moment that you made the right decision, it disappeared. I'm so glad you're here, she would say. The two of you were introduced in 2017 at Thanksgiving. And just like her Ed and Joni, you immediately felt her kindness, warmth, and welcoming presence. It was only later you had the terrifying experience of being the passenger of the car she was driving as she hit the gas and crossed 4 lanes of traffic, assuming it was safe to cross. And Ari, you met her later in life, and she welcomed you too and was excited that you were part of Aaron's life. Janet just had that wonderful way of connecting with others, as she did with her friends, some of whom she had known for over 80 years. She enjoyed her girls' trips with you and simply talking with you on the phone. I'm sure many of you in these past few years have missed that, and that you will continue to miss it, because it has left a hole for you as well. And that is why the career ribbon is torn and worn, and why we say a blessing, so that we remember that Janet will be a part of who you are every day, and that your lives are better because of that. We tear it so that we can appreciate. Adonai Natan, that God has given a life of 87 years, a mother and a grandma, a sister-in-law, an aunt, and a friend. V'Adonai Lakach. And even with that life ended, we still say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach, blessed be the name of God forever. God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life and the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you, the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life is through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures, as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. So in support of Janet's family, we rise together with them to recite the words of El Malei Rachamim, asking God to have compassion on her soul. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kiroshim Otihorim Kazohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Janet Bat Nachem V'Mindel, Shehalcha Le'olama, Ba'al Harachamim Yaz Tireha, V'Seter Kanafav Le'olamim, Bitzur Bitzur Chaim Et Nishmata, Adonaihu Nachalata, V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava, V'Nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Janet Guggenheim, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Receive in mercy, O God, the soul of our departed Janet Guggenheim. Grant her that everlasting peace which you have prepared for us in the world to come. Though no human eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor mind has grasped it, still it is our sure inheritance and our everlasting portion. O God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand. That the pain which loss inflicts is the measure of a love stronger than death. Though we cry in the anguish of our hearts, may we be like children who know that their parent is near and who cling unafraid to the trusted hand. In this spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us to your keeping, as we join with the mourners to repeat the words of the Mourners' Kaddish, held by the generations. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'amad divrach yerutei v'amlich malchutei, b'chayachon uvyomachon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'kedusha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. To the source of peace and peace to all who mourn. Comfort to all the bereaved among us, as together we say, Amen. This does conclude our service. However, for those that would like to, the family is going to be gathering for Shiva at the residence of Jane and Bobby Krasniks. The address is 26041 Salem Street in Huntington Woods. And I believe that there is a handout as you entered if you need the address, or feel free to see me as well.